This is episode 7, which is coming after, I think, episode 10, because I did it a couple of times and I didn't like it. And so I trashed it. And hopefully I like this one. And maybe you will too. Today we're going to talk about organic, biodynamic, and natural wines. The last topic will be very short. Let's first talk about organic farming. Now, pretty much in every wine producing country, there is an association or several associations that certify vineyards. Well, they certify all kinds of agricultural places, not just vineyards, that they are following specific organic guidelines, which is not using herbicides or pesticides, not using harmful ingredients. And when I say harmful, I don't mean harmful to the plants, I mean harmful to the workers. And that's really the issue of a lot of this stuff. I mean, Roundup was finally banned because it was hurting workers. It killed all the weeds it needed to kill, but come on, So anyway, how do you get rid of pests? And there's a lot of them in a vineyard. There's a lot of them in any kind of agricultural place, but vineyards seem to be more susceptible to all kinds of little bugs and things and mildew and things like that. How do you get rid of it? Well, almost every one of these bugs has a natural predator. So what you have to do is you have to find that natural predator and build a little colony in your vineyard so that you actually propagate those predators to wipe out the ones that are going to hurt your vines. Easier said than done, but that's basically the long and short of it. Now, there are certain things that you don't have a natural predator toward, and that one thing that's the biggest problem in vineyards is mildew. And the only way to get rid of mildew is with sulfur. Now, you got to understand something about sulfur, or as we call it in wine, sulfites. They're all sulfur derivatives, potassium metabisulfite, sulfur dioxide, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of the cheapest and the easiest way to get rid of bacteria, and mold is basically a bacteria. Now, people get all freaked out about it because they say they have allergic reactions to sulfur, and you can have an allergic reaction to sulfur, but not regarding the amount of sulfur that is in wine. That's pretty impossible because it's just not very much, and it's a lot less than it was 20 years ago. But somehow in the government's infinite wisdom back in 1987 said that all wines that have more than 10 parts per million of sulfur dioxide have to put a warning label on the back label. Well, let me tell you something. 10 parts per million is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And the fact is, an egg has 5 parts per million. So 2 eggs would have to carry a warning, right? Because 10 parts is the line. Now, it's total nonsense. But the fact is, organic farming is basically not using anything that's made from chemicals, using natural ingredients to solve your problems. Sometimes Mother Nature throws you a curve and you got to do something because you got a lot of money sitting out there in that vineyard. So I'm not going to fault guys for jumping over the line every now and then, but having a basically organic farm is, first of all, the cheapest way to go eventually, because those chemicals that you use on those bugs you try to get rid of, all you really do is build a better bug, because then the next wave of those bugs have a certain amount of built-in immunity to that herbicide or pesticide. So you've got to buy a stronger one. And when you buy a stronger one, it costs more money. Now, biodynamic farming was started by a guy named Steiner back at the beginning of the 20th century, an Austrian guy. And he had this concept that sounded very, very nice, that you basically take the entire ecosystem of the winery, of the vineyard, into consideration. Now, there are biodynamic farming and gardening associations all over the world, but there's not a specific mode that they all follow. Most of it is very similar to organic farming, but they go a little bit further in terms of the fact that they use the lunar calendar which separates groups into flower, fruit, leaf, and root. And there are 4 days that you can pick those items. Now, since grapes are a fruit, they should be picked on these days following a lunar calendar that has something to do with where Sagittarius and Aries are. And, you know, to be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure. And I don't really care. I think the main point here is, are the wines better? And that's hard to say, because in order for you to make a determination if biodynamic farming or even organic farming produces better grapes than not using either of those, you would have to farm the exact same grapes in the same vineyard and process them differently. Well, that's impossible, because once you start using any kind of herbicides or pesticides, the wind takes it all over the place. And that's the problem with vineyards that are organic next to vineyards who are not organic, because obviously some of it can spill over. So it's not an exact science. But I do have to say, through my couple of days of experience tasting wine, that organic and biodynamic wines tend to have more freshness to them. There's more livelihood to them. I don't really have any other explanation or words to give you as advice here, because, you know, I'm not really 100% sure. All I know is that the wines that I've had are spectacular, and do things that most other wines don't do. I've had friends of mine with biodynamic wines that they make that open the wine, leave the cork out of the bottle, put it on a table, and come back to it the next day. And I'm talking about a white wine, and it still tastes delicious. That's not going to happen a lot of times, okay? Now, granted, there's a lot of things that go into it, not just biodynamics or organic, but by and large, if nothing else, it's cheaper and it's more complete than using herbicides and pesticides. Now, natural wines, that is complete and total BS. There's no such thing as a natural wine. At least there are no official definitions. Now, there's a group of people that are going around saying, well, we're going to start something like organic farming for natural wines. But you talk to anybody who's like on the bandwagon for natural wines, and they all say something different. Well, we're going to keep our usage of herbicides and pesticides to a minimum. We're going to keep our sulfur dioxide to a minimum. We're going to keep, what is that minimum? And what difference does it make? The fact is, sulfur turns into a gas after you use it. Whether you use it as a spray or you use it as a powder, it turns into a gas and it dissipates into the air. So it doesn't really stay in the wine unless you put too much in the wine at bottling, and then you could have a problem. But like I said, farming has gotten to be so good these days that farmers don't need to use a lot of sulfur when they bottle their wine, or winemakers don't actually. So the fact is, it's not really an issue. Well, what else is there? Well, use natural yeast. Okay, natural yeasts are kind of the new thing. And what it is there's yeast grows on the outside of the grape. So in order to get any kind of fermentation, you have to crush it. And once you start crushing it, you start fermentation, because what happens is the yeast, which is a bacteria, starts attacking the sugar in the grape and turns half of it into alcohol and the other half into carbon dioxide, which goes into the air. Okay, now, a lot of people use commercial yeasts. Those are naturally made to start fermentation and get it going very quickly, because supposedly natural yeast don't have as much strength as manufactured yeast. And the problem is, if you're trying to make a dry wine, you need to convert almost all of that sugar to carbon dioxide and alcohol. And if you don't, and the yeast dies off before the sugar is converted, you've got a sweet wine on your hands. Now, if that's what you want, that's great. But if it's not what you want, you're in trouble. So using commercial yeast is one way to get rid of that. Now, I know a lot of new winemakers, and a lot of old winemakers actually, who are using natural yeast because they've learned how to deal with it. So they keep it alive until all the sugar is gone. But it's a crapshoot. So anyway, as far as natural wine is concerned, until somebody comes up with a definition that people can stand or sit or listen to, I'm not one of them, because I just don't need one more term in wine. We got too damn many of them as it is. Then, then maybe something will happen. But anyway, that's the long and short of it on biodynamic, organic, and natural wine.